Hello, everyone. Starting out today, we are going to be bringing on a guest. It is going to be Wheats from the Vancouver Titans, one of the coaches, to come discuss all sorts of Overwatch news and Titans and things like that. And also, we'll have a very much look forward to Poppin' Off segment.
And then we're going to be looking at some of the games coming up this weekend, which ones are going to be close and which ones are going to be the exact opposite of close. And then while we have Wheats on as a guest, we're going to talk about the performance of the Tier 2 players who have recently moved up into the Overwatch League.
I'm Avast. This is Jayne. And welcome to Contested. Hello, everyone. We are live again, a second time in a row from the Frontier Communication Studio here in Dallas, Texas. It feels so right to be here. It feels so right.
I can definitely, it's freeing to be out of my kitchen, and it is nice to be actually back in studio. And once again, just to make sure that all of you are perfectly clear, yes, I am Jayne, and yes, he is Avast, and we are going to tell you that literally every single episode. Just, I know some of you guys have a little bit of
We're going to swap it up in one of the intros, see if anyone catches it.
Yeah.
Let's just see if they would think that,
just start gaslighting them.
We just change the nameplates.
No one will notice.
They wouldn't
notice. They don't even pay attention to what we say in the first place. They're not going to pay attention to who's saying it.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that. And, speaking of things that I like to agree with, is my own segment idea that I proposed, which is the Jack in the Box popping off. Because first, we got to get this out of the way because it was a huge pop-off moment, but not the way you would expect. So we're going to be looking at the New York Excelsior versus the Hangzhou Spark, and the final map of the series. And, this is a retake moment for the Spark. Or for the New York, I should say. They're struggling to get back onto the point here on Oasis. It looks like they might have a chance. And what happens is that as soon as they get there and pop the nano onto Mono, they just all get off the point. They all get off the point. Just a drastic C9 to lose the series.
Yeah.
And while they were too busy chasing the frags in the back line. So that wasn't quite a popping off. It was more of an inverse popping off. But I wanted to put it out there because it was just so insane that, to me, New York would lose the series in that fashion. It was popping off the point. Exactly. Popping off the point. Presented by Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
Like, I was watching this live. Not live. I was rewatching this because I didn't see it live. And I was just blown away by how egregious
it was bad.
A C9 it was.
It was really bad. Like, most people are kind of talking about, like, haha, C9s if it's, like, one or two people stepping off the point or they don't touch it. Like, they're walking to and then they, like we saw it on Kings Road. They're, like, 1 meter away. They just don't touch. It's capped. Like, there were 5 people from New York up and on the point, and then simultaneously, both of them saw opportunities. And then the Winston jumped a little bit too high, and the Lucio and the ball chased a kill out there, and everyone just perfect comedic coordination where everyone just vacates the point at the same time, and it goes whoop, Spark win. It was pretty great.
It was painful. Oh yeah, it was Hotba, not Mono. It was Hotba.
Yeah,
I forgot that he was on Winston at the time, but still, it was. It also was looking like a fight they could have potentially won.
Absolutely. That was like that fight was still evolving. Like when I actually went back and reviewed that one in depth. That fight was far from over. And if anything, New York could have had just slightly favored to win that fight, especially like both of them saw opportunities. Both of those individuals, Hotba going for the Mercy Farah, and then the ball and Lucio chasing after their kill. Like if they had succeeded, both of them had opportunities to get frags. And I think in such a tight fight, if they had gotten those, I think that New York would have absolutely won that fight. So,
brutal.
It's like they knew that enough people were on the point that they're like, oh, I'll just get off just for a second, kill this person, come back. It's just like, it's like we could win if I do this. And then just everyone happened. It would be fine.
And it wasn't, and obviously there was no guarantee they win the fight, right?
No,
there was no guarantee.
No guarantee.
But it still was an egregious C9
yes.
in terms of like the context of how many people were alive, how many high mobility characters they had available to touch the point. So I just thought it was funny because it lost them the series.
They used all that high mobility to pop off the point.
Popping off the point. So
all of their mobility was used to get off of it. You can't immediately take that back and go back.
It was definitely a popping off moment. But we have a guest waiting in the wings.
Yes, we do.
We do have a guest today. We've been, we making sure to get more guests on here onto the segments. And our guest for today is Wheats of the Vancouver Titans, one of the assistant coaches for the Titans. Wheats, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Woo! Excellent.
Welcome to the show, Wheats. I'm sure you're a longtime watcher and very OG fan of the show, so it's finally great to have such a fanatic supporter of the show on to share in today's episode. But yeah, first things first, just to introduce yourself, let the viewers know who you are, because you've recently joined the Vancouver Titans, but before that, you have most of your history in Tier 2. So just give us the brief overview of who you are and why you're joining us for today's episode.
So what's up? My name's Weeds. I'm an assistant coach on the Titans right now. I came up from, well, I started in Tier 3 actually, like trying to be a player, but then I came into Tier 2 as a coach on a second wind, and I was with them for my entire Tier 2 career. I was with them from 2018 Season 3 to 2020 Season 1 when we got picked up.
Well, that's pretty
And,
storied history.
Yeah, so I was just a second wind lifer there the
That's
whole
pretty
time.
interesting, considering that second wind is a notorious for not having lifers,
Yeah.
because all their members were considered. I guess not the staff as much. I guess the
Yeah.
staff was relatively consistent
Yeah,
for you guys.
the
currently.
staff was all lifers. We were pretty much all there the whole time.
Yeah, well, second one definitely had a history of, you have very large amounts of success with second wind. Maybe not first, sometimes second, but consistently had a lot of players come into second wind, perform well, leave the team. But despite that, second wind was pretty high performing team in contenders consistently. So if anything, that just speaks to the staff
With
and
no
structure
money.
of the team with no money.
With no money.
Yeah, well, the one thing that we've definitely proved this year in the Overwatch League is that money does not buy wins.
No, it does not. It does not buy wins at all. And also, speaking of wins, Wheats, you recently, your team, Titans, recently had a pretty big win over the Dallas Fuel, which was also, I would say, a relatively interesting upset at the time. And I wanted to look into insight more for before we actually get into that victory, but sort of what led up to that point is, how was the Titans roster in its current iteration, since it was sort of a mix of second wind players, but not quite? What exactly was the process for this current iteration of Titans, and how was it assembled? Like, was this sort of a predetermined roster, or do you as coaches sort of do most of the building work there for its current spot?
We were just looking to find like guys to bring in that we knew wanted to were at the mechanical level to play in the Overwatch League.
So
we
you're
were
just
really
looking for good players?
Yeah, we were really focused on just mechanical skill, because I mean this goes back to our time on second wind, where there was points where we had like days or less than a day to build a roster to field in contenders, where we know if we can get mechanically skilled players that we can make them a team. So that's really the biggest priority for us, was just mechanical skill and then just fitting in with the group.
So is that because your approach in terms of how you're running your team, because mechanical skill, I assume, is something that the players either have or have not, or requires a large amount of time to kind of bring up to par, but you sound like you can deal with whatever they don't have as long as they do have the mechanical skill?
Yeah, they don't need to be all stars right away. Like we're just looking for the base level. Like, we see the potential in them. We do a lot of scouting work, so we see the potential of how skilled they are and their personality type to be a player that's going to grind very hard.
That's
to
an
become
interesting
better.
statement too, with the personality type, and I want to come back to that. But when you're dealing with somebody who has a very high level of mechanical skill, and for example, pretty much no other redeemable qualities, which I assume that you wouldn't actually pick them up if they literally had no other redeemable qualities. But what is the main focus for you to turn a mechanically skilled player into an Overwatch League caliber player?
You really just have to focus on well, obviously it's a lot of stuff in review, a lot of big macro plays and team play, but also you're just looking to make them you're looking to make them work as a unit, instead of, because if they had mechanical skill, they'd be used to just relying on their mechanical skill and not play as much as a team. So it's really turning them from mechanical gods into a unit.
Is that sort of how you guys identified picking up Shockwave, who's now been a pretty big portion, I would say, of the sort of the recent success we've seen with the current Titans roster, is how talented Shockwave is? Is that philosophy that you're talking about there, where you get these very mechanically gifted players and hopefully mold them into team players? Is that, and also, was anyone else looking at Shockwave, or was it just you guys?
I'm not sure if anyone else was looking at him, but we've had eyes on him for a while, because actually week 2 of Contenders Season 1. We actually lost to Montreal, which he was on. He was on Montreal Rebellion. And we identified him as a very good player when he beat us. He was probably one of the biggest reasons. So he's been on our list since then. He's relatively new to the competitive scene, so I don't know if he was on too many people's radars.
Yeah, that's true. Because I actually didn't know of him
Nope.
too very much. Honestly, before that, I didn't have my eyes on Shockwave. But also, I think that sometimes like something that's a problem when you're sometimes a little bit more tucked away in the tier 1 scenes, that sometimes you can lose sight of tier 2 unless you really keep your like eyes to the ground and making sure to keep a constant scout on talent, which is why I think it's really interesting for you guys, Wheats, in your current situation, and that so much of this roster was currently elevated to Overwatch League in a short notice, and so you actually have a much greater pretty much much better idea of where the pulse of like tier 2 currently is, and like what players are on the upswing, downswing, who could fit well into a roster. Do you think that being so recently elevated compared to a lot of people that have sort of been tucked away in like this enclave of Overwatch League, do you think it gives you an advantage when it comes to scouting?
I think it gave us a huge advantage when it came to scouting, because we're not just like looking at box scores or like one-off VODs or anything, like because we were coaching to play against these players, so
Yeah.
we were watching these guys like in depth already. We weren't just doing like a scouting report, like we were actually getting ready to play against them. So I think it really helped us in identifying who we want.
Just before we move on to talking about the actual game between the Vancouver Titans and the Dallas Fuel, are there any players that you think deserve a shout out for kind of being looked over right now within the tier 2 scene? You know, regardless of role, is there any kind of shockwave sitting out there ready to be picked up by an Overwatch League team?
I think most of the best players I know, personally, or not personally, but like that I think are at like the top of their game right now are like underage. So it's not really
Story as old as
lack
time.
of scouting.
No kidding.
It's not a lack of scouting thing. It's like a lack of eligibility. So
Why can't they just age faster?
Yeah, just give them
Yeah.
aging juice.
Just want to put them in the chamber of accelerated
But-
aging.
for players like that, I would point out like from second win, the guys we didn't get to come up, Speedily has been like a star projectile player
Yes,
since
yes,
he's been in
Speedily is very
contenders.
good.
OG is probably
Another
gonna
good
be
one,
a
yeah.
top owl main support when he gets in.
I think those are both good
And-
shout outs.
Yeah.
Those are both very good
Yeah.
shout outs. Well, I guess moving forward beyond just generals, because, philosophy is cool and all, but we have a lot of time. Also, chat, I do realize eyes to the ground is not the actual saying, okay? I have this really bad habit where I start a saying and I change the wrong words.
Yeah.
I put the wrong things in there. I realize it's ears to the ground, not eyes to the ground, but whatever.
Isn't it boots to the ground?
No, it's like ears to the ground. Like you're listening.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
Alright.
boots on the ground is like a military saying, though,
Well,
right?
military, so
Yeah, I mean, regardless, the point is I have dumb brain. Okay, that's the point here.
true.
That's the point here. But moving forward is that we wanted to sort of do since we've changed up the format, we have Wheats available with us. We wanted to sort of go through our topics for today, but also have you weigh in and sort of give us your thoughts from a current Overwatch League coach about sort of like these topics that we're going to discuss anyways, because we think it'd be really interesting to hear from someone that's currently competing, and with the current situation where you guys are like on an upswing and everyone's feeling a little bit more confident about your performance moving forward. Where does it stand for you as someone that's really inside that process? And our first topic was looking at Shock as a whole roster.
Yes.
And how disgustingly nasty we think they currently are, and just and sort of the value of having such an incredibly big depth of like just so many players that can fill so many roles. And from your perspective, Wheats, do you think that Shock is currently just unbeatable? Do you think they've done anything differently than any other team? Or do you feel that like right now we're looking at them at their best, but they can still have some clear weaknesses that can be exploited, I guess, from someone that's looking to play them?
I think everyone has ups and downs, and I don't think anyone's unbeatable on any day, because sometimes they could just not show up. But that's really rough with them because they almost always show up. Like they're not they don't have the team culture to ever come in and mess around, and they also have like by far the most like maybe like top 3 guys at each role like on their team. like even their backup guys are better than some team starters. So it's gonna be really hard to beat them on any given day, but I think anyone could beat them.
And team culture is actually something really interesting because we've talked about a lot here, Jayne, about team culture, and generally when a team is stacked with talent and is underperforming, it's almost always a team culture issue.
Usually.
And I do think it's pretty interesting that for you, looking at your roster and how you describe that your sort of scouting process was, we want to get very mechanically oriented players and then mold them into a team. I feel like that's also sometimes that, are you also, I'm assuming, taking into account personality and where that fits into that team culture issue? Like, what is the team culture you wish to provide for the Titans? And is it any different than what you'd expect from like a Shock? Is it just dependent on the players that you have? Or do you always want one singular team culture that drives for success no matter which players you have?
I don't think there's a singular team culture. Like, it has to change, like, between like us and Shock as examples. Like, they won the championship. Like, they have little left to prove. They're already the most dominant roster in the history of the game. So their culture needs to be keeping it up, where our culture is we need to be hungrier than ever. Like, we're finally here. Here's our shot. Like, let's go all out. It's like so every team is probably going to have a different optimal culture to set.
Now, we had the GM of the Florida Mayhem on the show a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about one of the ways that they were approaching building their team was to aim for 500. Or they just wanted to be above 50%, more wins than losses. They weren't aiming to be the number one team in the league. And, you're seeing that kind of philosophy. Obviously, they are doing that and much more with the current iteration of their roster. And this is something that I'm really interested in getting your perspective on, because when we're talking about the Vancouver Titans, a lot of people look down on the management of the org, but the players themselves and the staff, I would assume you're included in this, there's not a lot of expectations for success with your roster, obviously, with the low amount of time that you've had to assemble the roster and the fact that you are in an unenviable situation. What are your goals as an organization? Are you, like, if you were to play the Shock, for example, next week, would you go into it looking for a good showing, or would you be approaching that with, the desire to beat the champions of the Overwatch League? Where are you with your internal team's expectations?
I think our internal expectations are very different than what people would look at us and say. Like, we come into every game like trying our heart out to win. And I know that that's like a PR BS like things to say, but like we're not used to losing at all. Like, in contenders, you have to win to survive, to keep playing. So we're not content to just sit there and be bad. Like,
Yeah, even
we
if
want
you're
to
bad in the
go and win.
Overwatch League, you're not going to get relegated, but
Yeah.
that doesn't happen.
Getting paid to lose is never ideal because you're not coming back. You're
Yeah.
not coming. Well, it
Yeah.
depends, I guess. I guess
We
it
want
depends.
to stick around. We don't want to just be, oh, they pulled these guys up. Like,
So
we
going into
really want to
the
prove ourselves.
so going into the game against the Dallas Fuel, did you believe that? Did you and did your players believe that you were going to win it, or was it more of a hope? What was the mentality or expectation going into specifically the game against the Dallas Fuel?
We believe if we could do everything right, we were gonna win.
Just be good, forehead.
Yeah.
If you
Like-
just be good, forehead, you will achieve victory. But which is it's a good philosophy to have. Actually, that leads us into about the culture question we asked. And for you guys, it's you want to be hungry, and you're thinking that there not necessarily is a singular team culture that leads to success. It depends on what your situation is. Our opinions from the outside is that the Fuel is currently crumbling upon itself like an exploding star. And
Oh yeah, we're
there's-
just going right for the jugular.
I mean,
are we?
that's how I feel when they have this much talent on them, and they're performing really not where they should.
Yeah.
And so, do you think from an outsider looking in, Wheats, that the Fuel is having a culture problem within its own? Because realistically, regardless, because this isn't supposed to be a put down upon you because you guys played very well. It's more of just looking at our expectations of like on paper what the Fuel roster would be. Do you think this is us misattributing a cultural problem to them, or do you think there's something more structurally / roster based for some of their issues?
I definitely don't think it's roster based because they have a lot of talent, but I don't know if you can really look from the outside and say like necessarily it's a culture thing, or like, because there's so much stuff that goes into winning Overwatch League games that like even if one little part is messed up, it could really sink the whole ship. So I don't know if you can necessarily say it's culture from the outside, but it could be that.
Okay, I'm gonna push you a little bit, and if this goes too far, please tell me to just sawed off. But as you were,
I'll knock over your microphone.
oh, Avast is just gonna kick my chair over. But as you're approaching for it, you said that you believe that if you did everything right, that you could beat the Dallas Fuel. Is this a mentality like did you approach it like you wanted to play your game, or in your scouting were you actively looking to exploit some things that you thought the Dallas Fuel were doing poorly, regardless of the reason for them performing poorly?
Uh, we were more on like playing our game because I mean, if you watch the match back, like even when we were kind of feeding, like we were still going first and going fast on stuff. So we were more focused on making them play our game than we were really worried about anything to do with who they're playing or whatever.
Okay. So pretty much what I'm hearing here so far is that we can't look in and say that any team might be having cultural problems because it's tough to tell from the outside because of all the factors. And you guys played your game and you beat Fuel at it. Even though Fuel's game is so far to lose tragically. So okay, that's fair. So if you play your game, which is to win, then I think that'll achieve greater results. But as understandable as a coach, you can't really just sit there. You can't just sit there and be like, yeah, every team other than mine has cultural problems, which what am I gonna expect, right? Like you can't actually sit there and say like this team is gonna be having issues because you don't really know. But that's just my opinion because I get paid to talk about things. I don't have to be paid to teach people things like you, Wheats. So you're allowed to be aloof and not be a little vulture like myself. You're allowed to be aloof.
So, in terms of looking forward, we're going to be talking more about the upcoming matches this weekend. But before we get into predicting teams that aren't yours, was wondering if you would be confident enough to give a prediction about your upcoming game against the Boston Uprising. Now, Boston Uprising, of course, started out.
You're gonna ask him to predict for his own game?
Yeah.
What's he gonna say? We're gonna lose, but it's gonna be really good.
Hey, man.
I was gonna ask him to predict for like other games that he's not playing.
Why? There's no fun in that.
Well, I mean, what is he gonna say? Like, okay, well, sure, why not? Okay.
Well, I don't know what he's gonna say because apparently you're not letting me ask him.
Go on.
Okay. Wheats, we're just gonna cut through the chat because apparently Avast is impatient with me. Do you have any thoughts about going against the Boston Uprising? They've been looking up and up, improving despite still losing just barely. But do you think that the Dallas Fuel was a one-off, or is this the start of a winning streak for your team?
I don't think that it's I don't think it's gonna be like a blowout or anything. I think it's gonna be a really close game versus Boston. They've been like getting so much better and better, and you can see from their play. Obviously, I think we're gonna win. Like I'm not gonna give you a scoreline. I don't know. Ideally you 3-0 every game, right? But that almost never happens. So.
You played right into his trap, Jayne.
You know what?
I told you. What's he gonna? Is Wheats is gonna come out there and be like, my team, they suck ass.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Avast.
I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair.
It was one of my favorite things at like World Cup or anything like that, where some of the coaches go out to dinner and then actually share their predictions against each other. Like it's like
when you don't have to have any PR speak. It's great. Well, since you're not involved in these other matches, I want to ask about Wheats. So some of the other matchups that we were looking at this weekend, I think are really interesting in looking at the trajectory of these teams since we're getting close to playoff time. And these two matches that really I want to touch on are for NNA at least. We're not really going to hit on the Asia region too much. Is going to be Houston, Florida, and Toronto, Dallas. So I do think that they're both like very interesting matchups in terms of where they're currently at. How are you feeling from an outsider, from a coach perspective of another Overwatch League team for those two matchups, Mayhem, Outlaws, Defiant, Fuel, and what do you feel are going to be like the score lines for those? If you can give me a reasoning, because I really want to hear from someone that's looking in and competing against them, how you feel like the relative strengths of those squads are.
So for Florida, Houston, Houston's been on a come up, like from, well, not the start. They're doing really well at the start of the season. They kind of tapered off a little bit, but they've been back on the upswing. So I still think Florida will win. It'll probably be like a 3-1. I guess 3-1 for Florida, just because I think their players are so strong. They're like their DPS line is really, really insane. So I'm gonna give them the edge in that, even though Dante I think is one of the best players at his role. And then
And then
what
we
was
had
the next
Defiant
game? Sorry.
Fuel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Defiant Fuel.
We can touch on others too. I mean, people in chat are asking me some others, but I mean, we have it here, so you might as well ask. But let's hit
Okay.
Defiant Fuel first.
Yeah, Defiant Fuel. Defiant's been on the come up too. I think they've
You
been
think Defiant's been
performing
on
a
the
lot better.
come up?
Yeah, I think they'll be playing a lot better next week. Although I think Dallas should win. If they clean up a lot of the stuff from their match versus us, I think Dallas should win. It should be a close game though. I don't think it will be a blowout.
Close game still isn't good though.
Yeah,
I think in that situation.
I kind of grimace there as like close game against the Fuel. I mean, like obviously, the Fuel losing to you guys with the state that you were still in. Well, obviously, it wasn't a good look for them, and I think that close game against the Defiant probably isn't what the Fuel's looking for either. But other than us just throwing the matches that we are looking forward to this weekend, or the ones that chat is looking forward to, are there any teams or storylines that you are following personally, or are you kind of just eyes to the ground, focused on the next match, the teams that you guys are playing in the near future?
I mean, we do have a double match, so I've been super focused on those against Boston and Atlanta. But one of the teams I've been watching pretty closely has been X of the Valiant, because I think they're on like the super hard cover. I think they're gonna be like one of the best teams with this meta that's coming up. So I'm pretty excited to watch them.
And so for this meta, you're referring to as the meta where they removed the hero pool restrictions.
Yes.
So, I guess we can already hit on that since you hinted about what do you feel is that next meta after the restrictions are removed?
I think you're gonna see a lot of stuff similar to the Melee.
Mm-hmm.
Just Melee meta mainly.
Wasn't that mostly still a lot of things we've been seeing, which is like a lot of Ash Tracer, right?
Yeah, but you're gonna see Echo's unbanned, so you're gonna see Echo back a little more.
For sure.
Or not a little more, like you're gonna see Echo back for teams that like playing Echo, and you're gonna see some Rush actually. I've seen, so I think there's gonna be a pretty diverse meta that's upcoming. But
do you think that the Genji buffs are gonna be enough for him to see play outside of teams like the Paris Eternal, just hard
or New York
Sparkle?
I think those teams that love Genji will play Genji. They were playing it before he even got buffed, but I don't really personally have too much stock in the Genji when there's like so many much better picks. So
why do you think? As an aside, why do you think those Genji buffs don't really touch him or change him as a hero? Because I agree. I think Genji's still bad character, should be under the DLC lock still. No team should be picking up. They should just cover up that with some tape on the hero select screen. So why do you think the buffs for Genji don't really move him into a pick that you think gains much value?
I just think it's such a risky pick to pick Genji when you could pick much like safer stuff that like Echo is a lot safer to pocket than like Genji. And usually when you play Genji, you have to play Ana to like go for Nano Blades to even get any value off his ult. So I don't really value him high at all.
The Brigida nerfs those aren't going to be live, right?
Those are still experimental.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are still experimental. So so you still technically could pocket Echo with the current Brigida iteration.
Yeah.
And I guess Genji as well.
And
but
that
Genji's
is
still,
so strong.
That is very strong. Yeah. It makes sense then. So a lot of very similar meta that we're predicting once we remove those restrictions, except now we see the return of the Echo a little bit more.
Now, I know that the experimental patches aren't going to be something that you've scrimmed, or maybe it's a little bit too far into the future for you to care about as a member of the Overwatch League. But with the removal of Brigida's armor pack doing overhealing and giving people additional armor, do you think that's going to reduce the potency of dive, reduce the role of flankers like Tracer, Genji, or Echo, or just general thoughts about the Brigida change?
I think it'll definitely lower her ability to like enable dive heroes, but she still has really strong peel, so I don't know if she'll be going anywhere. People just might play more like anti-dive stuff with her. I haven't seen it really at all in play, so I'm not too sure, but
I tend to agree with that assessment.
Yeah,
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, right? Because the armor really gives max value to when you preemptively want to dive or something versus just healing someone when they're getting taken a lot of damage. It makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess you touched upon it a little bit earlier about Valiant playing Eternal yourself and how they're going to look really strong in this new hero pool. Do you think that when they're in their matchup versus the Eternal, do you think that's a W for them? Do you think that they're going to be a team to like that they're going to be like a really top tier, like in NA, let's say for specifically NA, like looking like a top 3 team, like heading into this, the next week and into the playoffs for the tournament?
Yeah, I'd probably put them in that 3 slot behind Shock and Fusion.
Shock.
Shock
and Fusion. Don't they play this weekend?
Yes, they do.
They do play this weekend.
That's
I kind of forget about that because I'm a very, I keep on underrating Fusion according to Fusion fans, and then underrating Shock according to Shock fans.
Don't you underrate every team according to that team's fans?
Yeah, accordingly. So, how are you feeling, Wheats? As like someone that's played against them, that's obvious, more than likely. Even if I can't remember if you played against them recently in matches, but at least in scrims, more than likely. How are you feeling about both those squads going into this weekend? Shock and Fusion both. Do you think there's like a big skill gap between the two? Or do you think it's going to be like a pretty close game?
I think Shock Fusion should be close, but I definitely think Shock is just on another level in terms of everything they have going for them. But I think it should not be like a blowout game for sure. But I'd give a Fusion a map or two.
Now, one of the ongoing conversations that we've been having on this show is trying to compare the Asian division to the North American division. So, who do you think is the actual best team in the league? Do you think it's the Shanghai Dragons, or do you think it's an American team?
Or do you think the parity's a lot closer than we really think? Do you think it's like we're kind of just being like Korea boos and being like, hey, you're in the Asia region, you must be really good?
I think the Asia region, it's really weird because they play so much different stuff, so it's really hard to compare the teams because you can't even like for sure say what a matchup would look like considering they've never had to like counter comp each other or anything. But I would put Shock at the top above anyone.
See, he didn't say Vancouver.
Hey, yeah. Well, I mean, if he says Vancouver now, then I'm just gonna kick you off the show, Wheats. Like, I like you, but we're not gonna have outright lies. We're gonna have outright lies.
You're the
show.
truth police over here. You're only allowed slight exaggerations in content.
We'll keep trying our best, but
the second ongoing conversation that we've been having on this show is also about the difference between the actual internal structures of teams. And you mentioned Los Angeles Valiant as one of the teams that you were keeping an eye on. And obviously, this is a team that everybody thought was really going to be 20th if they were lucky, sort of thing. And then with Packing 10 having done such a good job and then having seems to be, at least from the outside, a very competent organization and staff, they've done quite well. Whereas other teams that we've labeled as being player-led, such as the Toronto Defiant, which we spoke about earlier, they seem to have much more of like a player-run culture. Do you think that in the Overwatch League, a player-run kind of team or culture is effective, or is it, is there a ceiling to how effective a player-centric team can actually perform?
Do they need your big daddy authority, Wheats, to come in there and keep them in line?
I think you always need an outside force on any team to like that isn't in the game with you to tell you, because like I don't know, players will get enamored with what's going on in game, all the little stuff, but you really need like a outside guy to be looking in and like telling them how it is for real instead of what they think is happening, because they only see their perspective. Like we see a lot more stuff, so I think you definitely do need a top guy.
Top dog, level 100 mafia boss. Oh, man. I don't remember what that game is in relation. I don't remember what that game's in relation to, but it just reminded me of that a little bit. Well, I guess it's sort of a rundown of what we get. We get the venerated Wheats thoughts on we get some prediction from Wheats. Yep. But another real big thing that's happened recently too, that we discussed a little bit in our last show, Jayne, was there's been a lot of contenders changes that they announced. A huge amount, really, that where it's like they're kind of restructuring the whole path to pro. And Blizzard Esports announced that like we're going to be, essentially abolishing APAC. We're making some entire format changes, or like going into like even more of an education style system for NA and EU. And as someone that has been in contenders for a while and seeing the culture of it and the format of it change and has now gone to Overwatch League, Wheats, do you think that any of these changes are spectacularly beneficial to where we want to be as like an esport, where Overwatch League wants to go as a vision and as like sort of a competition? Or do you think that these are kind of asinine or just like mixed changes? Like, what are your thoughts on the changes?
So the focus on education is actually a pretty good idea, I think. Like, getting these guys ready. Like, if the goal is to go to the Overwatch League, you're kind. There was really no like preparation for contenders players to be taken up to the Overwatch League. Like, you just kind of go learn from your team. But to get education from Blizzard, I feel like would be pretty beneficial. I also like them turning it to tournaments, like monthly tournaments. It kind of feels like pre-contenders, tournaments. So I'm pretty big
Because
fan
some of the
that.
regions, though, they're still in a league format, though.
Yes.
Some of, like, which ones? It was South America's like a hybrid. OCE, I think, is still league
Korea
format.
is in a league.
Korea is still a league format too. Do you think it would make more sense to just make everything tournament style, or some regions benefit from having this league style format?
I'm honestly not sure why some regions are different from others. They must have like had their teams identify that like, oh, it would be better for Korea to have a season because of this. Like, I don't actually know the exact reasons.
Yeah, it seems kind of like, just weird,
Yes.
right? It just seems a
Yeah.
little weird to me. Like,
Weird is a good way.
especially when you want to have like uniformity as like a scene and like where you want to go. It's just odd.
On the other hand, maybe they're just using this season as kind of an experiment. Like, we run every single possible format
And see which one works best.
Just see which one works best, and then just adopt that one in all regions in
Yeah,
the future.
I mean,
You
I
could do
guess
that.
so. Yeah. What about also? You said education would be a good thing for players, Wheats, and as like for people in contenders. What sort of education exactly do you think is beneficial that Blizzard could offer contenders players?
I think they could teach them about like marketing themselves and like just how to get themselves out there. Because I don't know, I know a lot of players that have like there's all these people out there that want to follow them, and a lot of players will talk about how like that they don't get picked up and stuff, but they're not really putting themselves out there
Yep.
on a social media level to get picked up. So
One of the key pieces of advice that I give to players whenever they're asking me how do I get into the Overwatch League, it's like, you can be a great teammate, you can be great mechanical skill, but if nobody knows who you are, nobody's going to pick you up. Like, the best kept secret is still a secret. So I definitely think
Yep.
it, especially the PR training, being present, being able to actually handle attention once they start getting some. If you're used to being completely unknown and then you get a lot of attention very quickly, that can be overwhelming to players and affect their performance as well.
True. Luckily, fame has not affected me at all.
No,
Nothing. When I drive my Lambo home and take the helicopter
in
over
the Hollywood Hills.
in the Hollywood Hills, then it doesn't affect me in any way. And also, this is sort of a dual question to you both because I think it's interesting to have perspective. Should staff be included as part of these Blizzard initiatives for education for like contenders teams? Should Blizzard also be helping staff understand their responsibilities? Because let's be real, staff they're not always professional from the get-go, right? Because sometimes you come into staff member and you want to learn, and
Yeah.
you're learning as players are learning with you, and you're learning what it means to be a coach,
Mhm.
what it means to be a manager. You don't always have a previous background. Is this something that Blizzard should also try to educate on?
Wait, do you want to start? I'll offer after.
I think it would be like there's no downside to teaching coaches like how to market themselves to get out there, because that's honestly one of the hardest things as a coach is to like show what you do for your
Yes.
team, because
Yes.
you just do for your team, and then you go and that's it. Like you don't get to pop off on stream or anything like that, So just teaching coaches how to get their name out there and stuff, and then also just maybe like leadership classes, maybe, I don't know, stuff like that to help them really be ready to be in charge of other people.
Yes, all of those soft skills are very important, and there's always going to be times where you exist in an environment and you don't really get any sort of feedback about what you should be doing, what you're doing wrong in that situation. Now, I think there is a little bit of a difference between players and the staff, and the fact that the players basically are the product of the
Yeah.
Overwatch League, and they're
You
going
know,
to be.
I would say though I agree, but I do think staff could be an
Yeah.
important part of
I
it.
think it's important, but I think that it shouldn't be on the Overwatch League in order to do that. Like,
Yeah.
the ownership groups of the teams I think that those are skills that should be taught by the organizations, because every single team is different. It's like whether you mandate a coach to be a specific role or something. I don't think there's any two teams in the Overwatch League that have a perfectly identical coaching structure or how they actually run their teams. So I think that professional development just in general, especially around soft skills, is very important, not just in performing your job, but developing as a person. I just feel like that would be pretty hard to implement at a organization level where coaches, analysts, all those positions are very different org to org. Whereas if you're a player in the Overwatch League, you're a player in the Overwatch League. That is much more cookie cutter, and you can provide education that is directly relevant and targeted.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'll have to say.
Yeah.
So overall, then your impression, Wheats, is that the restructuring of contenders to help this pipeline is mostly positive, and like refocusing education on players is pretty positive. But are you feeling extremely confident on these changes, or is it more of a we're gonna have to wait and see because Blizzard has promised changes before that have sometimes been
Yeah,
hit
I
or
think it's
miss?
definitely always a wait and see with contenders because, like, I don't know that they change it so much that it's really hard to tell like what
Yeah.
they actually liked or didn't like about the old format. So I think it's always just a wait and see with contenders, honestly.
So building off of the talk about contenders, this is a conversation that's probably been going on since the advent of Overwatch esports. Well, at least the Overwatch League, I would suppose, is the relative power level between contenders, teams, and players compared to teams and players of the Overwatch League. There's the big meme around Runaway not being Overwatch League. Oh, then they come in and almost win the entire damn league. And recently, of course, your team has been the center of this discussion with whether or not a team in contenders, like NA contenders, would be top 5 owl, bottom 5 owl. Everybody seems to have different opinions. And again, more recently, we've seen Onigod and Kevster, who were very highly regarded members, not only in contenders, but members of Team Doge, which pretty much swept North American contenders. Where do you think North American contenders' relative power level fits in? Is on both a player and a team perspective? Help us settle this debate.
Think carefully.
I think you're definitely wrong if you think like a contenders team is going to come in and just run the table with the league. Like, it's so different. I don't think. I think a lot of contenders teams,
Flipped and shipped.
a lot of contenders teams will win their weekly with like a bottom 5 owl team and say like on Twitter, we deserve to be an owl. Like, we could run the table with everyone.
I've never heard of such a thing before. Contenders players saying they've won scrims against Overwatch League players.
But they could dumpster all but the top 5 Overwatch League teams.
Okay.
So I think it's really just like it's not like ignorant, but it's like wishful thinking of like contenders teams. And even like we were guilty of it on second wave. We're like, oh, like when we get to owl, like, or if we ever get to owl, like it's going to be so like we can do that. But it really hits you in the face once you're there. So
what is like you said, there is a big difference. Can you give me like the largest difference between contenders teams and Overwatch League teams?
So I think the biggest difference is just like, I think this goes for every sport too, not just esports, but like once you go to the next level, the game's just faster. Everything happens faster and everyone's better. So like in contenders, you're the best player, you're the best team, but in OWL, everyone has the best players from their old teams. So it's not like you're nothing special in Overwatch League.
So that's an interesting. I want to build off that question. Just made it up on the spot. But do you think
you're so smart and you're so fluid?
Yeah, huge. Just pivot from question to question.
I love it.
I'd be so fluid if you didn't interrupt me. Anyway, the question being, do you think that teams like Team Doge and the players on Team Doge, if they reach the top of contenders and they are, say, a cut above everyone else, do you think that causes them to maybe stagnate and be able to, or struggle to improve because they don't have as much competition?
Yeah, I think it definitely will stop your improvement when you're not going into scrims and competing with people and you're just blowing people out. Because it's, I mean, especially just for their specific case, they didn't really have a coach, so but they didn't need to improve to be the best team in that system. Like they were just better than everyone. So
just better.
Yeah, just better. They're just better. I'm sorry, my brain, like, for some reason, like, when Jayne was like, "Stop interrupting me, bitch," I was like, my mind went blank for a second there. I was like, I had to refocus there a little bit. Well, now that you're I guess now piggybacking off of the whole like Overwatch League contenders questions, and hopefully you don't get John Galted, Wheats. You know, we'll try to protect you from the mean Redditors that might say that you might dare imply that contenders players aren't going to come in and beat Overwatch League teams all the time. But I think that's something that's really interesting for you guys in particular, is that you have brought on, I would say, some, like, you have a really interesting mix of veteran contenders players and some newer talent, because you have a player like Rolf, who's been in the system for a really long time, honestly, like a really long time, you know. And I remember playing against Rolf, and he used to be like the big thing, the big guy on the block. And you have this mix with very, very old contenders talent and new contenders talent. Do you think that for players like Rolf in particular, who now you have on your roster, do you think that sometimes the process of the path to pro and all these things that we've seen, it sometimes can skip by these older players that are still talented, but just maybe there's just like some sort of bias, either like maybe whether it be an age bias or it could be some other type of bias, like that why these players sometimes get overlooked?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an age bias in Overwatch where, like, more than any other esport really, where people just look at the new guy that just turned 18 and they're like, oh, like, this guy's the hot new thing, he stomped contenders, where as a guy like Rolf is like, oh, he's been good for a long time, but like I don't know if people just thought he couldn't go up to the next level even though he was tier 1 before there was like a system made by Blizzard to just made Overwatch League tier 1. So I think older players definitely do get overlooked a lot.
Well, you have scrims after this, do you not? What's our time? You have, like, you said you were triple blocking today.
Yeah,
Oh,
I got
geez.
scrims
remember
in
triple
5
block
minutes.
Yeah, I got a triple
Pain and
block.
suffering.
Well, I guess, I mean, I would say, I mean, do you have anything else you'd like to ask
mean,
Wheats? Because he does have to go triple block.
We covered everything we wanted to ask him and more. So
Wheats covered everything.
Thank you for being so open and such a great guest, Wheats. I definitely appreciate you joining us and sharing your insight. Best of luck with your triple blocks. Remember to hydrate, I guess. I hate the triple block days. They were always awful.
Well, thank you so much, Wheats. Hope you have a good day. Have fun with the scrims, or don't, you know, whatever. I'll still be here.
Thank you for having me on. Is your first phone-in guest. Maybe we could do it again another time.
Yeah, sure thing.
All right, see you guys.
Peace out,
See ya.
Wheats.
Okay, chat. Well, I hope you enjoyed our first phone-in guest. It was our first time working in that format. I think it went pretty well.
It went pretty smoothly.
Yeah.
All things considered, we were able to hear him. You guys, I know the chat can't hear him because it's noise gated, but we were able to hear him pretty well. Like,
Yeah.
I honestly, it's not that I don't expect it. It's not that I expect things to go wrong. It's just I always anticipate,
Yeah.
you know, things going wrong.
100%. I guess I owe you $5 now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we do want to keep doing more of this and having more guests on. You know, our original plan for this show, with all the homestands that were going to be happening in Dallas, we were going to have a lot of people in the studio and joining us. But while the COVID-19 crisis is still going on, we're going to be sticking to this phone-in format as much as possible. So this week's mailbag is very simple. We want to know how we could improve this format to make it more entertaining, interesting, engaging for you as a viewer, as well what guests you'd like to see on the show in the future.
And we have thrown out a net to some guests. So we have plenty of guests that we're currently working on lining up, because obviously we got derailed with the whole going from home. But any sort of guests that you guys are looking forward to, me, Smile, I don't know if we'll take a look, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but we'll put you on the list maybe. And but any sort of guests or ideas that you would like for us to implement to help you guys enjoy it more, like, we're always going to be very open to that feedback. Because now that we're rebooting after the whole missing of the homestand stuff, I'm going to shed another tier. I'll call it tier 2.
Yeah.
Mike laughed. You didn't laugh. Mike laughed, though. I called it tier 2. Get it?
Oh, I didn't get
the
it.
second tier.
I didn't laugh because it went over my head.
It's the 2 tiers.
Yeah, it's too slick up here.
It's a little smooth. You've ironed out all those wrinkles. Negative 1 out of 10 joke? That's where you're wrong. Well,
hey, man, that's an improvement from your 0 out of 10.
I don't think so. That's a negative number. That is a negative number. I'm stealing enjoyment if you're in a negative. I think that's how comedy works. If you're in the negative, you start stealing it from others. You're like a what is it? A Dementor from Harry Potter. Yeah, you. That was
no
me.
humor.
I voted for Solomon as the next guest. Okay. Super as a guest. Actually, Super as a guest.
I was actually thinking
Yeah.
that Super would be a hilarious guest.
Yeah.
I'd want him in person. There's some people who are just like have presence and are very animated, charismatic. I think that Super would be a lot of fun to have on.
Yeah, I don't think he's really, charismatic or funny or interesting, but I guess we can reach out to him.
Yeah, we can.
We can reach out to him.
We can.
As long as we can
try.
belittle him in person.
That's
then
my favorite
It's
thing.
perfectly
Yeah.
fine. Well, get a Korean player that doesn't know English and don't bring a translator. That I don't know what our plan would be
That
for
sounds
that.
like an Eric Andre skit.
Yeah, that just we'll just eat like spicy noodles and
So
hopefully I don't die.
Team Envy actually does have a translator, a nice lady who goes by the name of Deer, and I think that is something that we are going to be doing, is bringing her on, at least introducing her to her. Very interesting, accomplished woman.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the opportunity for us to actually have translated interviews with Korean individuals, even though you guys were joking, it's absolutely something that we are planning to do, and hopefully you can figure out a way to make sure it is as smooth and interesting as possible for you.
But if you want to give those suggestions, just put them in the YouTube comments when it goes live on Envytv on the YouTube. You can also do it if you're in my Discord. There is a contested Mailbag Discord channel. If you want to put the guest list or whatever improvements that you'd like to see, any sort of additions, throw them in there. I read them in that channel. We read them on the YouTube. We always get filtered back to us because we get spoon-fed like little babies from our producer. He's like, here, have some information. Have it. And so if you want to respond there, those are the easiest ways to do it. Didn't we have Mailbag for this week?
That was our mailbag.
Oh,
wait.
No, we had Armchair GM.
Damn,
right?
Do we have our Armchair GM responses?
I thought we still had Armchair. We have a lot. Yeah, okay, we're pulling up some. We're pulling up some of those responses.
I just noticed that my mic stand is taller than yours.
Yeah, well, there's a
Is that
couple
because I
reasons
speak
for
so
that.
softly?
Well, it's because I keep my eyes at the ground.
Good. Wow, we literally got a text document here.
Message.text.
Jeez.
I'm gonna open it up.
Did we get another 95 Theses?
I'm gonna open it up here. Okay, this one isn't as terrible as I thought. It was actually. Oh wait, I'm scrolling. I'm horizontally scrolling. Wait a minute. Okay.
Oh god. Oh god. Oh god.
Well, because it literally says in the message, I'm assuming I have some fat stacks to drop, both in terms of text and the message length here. So do we have the name for the person that wrote this? Hoppy Jones. Hoppy Jones. Okay. There wasn't a Reddit thread, so you forgot it? No. Well, you can still make Reddit threads, by the way. You're not been banned from making Reddit threads for the contested questions.
You're my favorite person, Homebound 11.
You haven't been banned from this. We don't have an embargo on that. We just also have my Discord channel and the YouTube comments. So I see we have it. So they're going to be so Hoppy Jones is looking to be an armchair GM of the Justice.
Nice. My favorite team. That's what he says.
Okay. Would you like to go? Do you want to do the TLDR? Do you want to just read like the TLDR?
No, I want to read the entire thing. The man put the effort.
You want to do the whole thing?
I want to do.
I'm going to let you read.
You know
read
what?
the whole
I'm a
thing.
professional
I'll
voiceover
let you
artist.
read the
That's
whole
100% not
There
a
we
lie.
go.
Hoppy Jones was his name? Hoppy Jones. I've decided to become the armchair GM for the Justice, my favorite team. I'm assuming I have some fat stacks to drop. Here's how I rework the roster, starting with the tank line. First move is to drop Lulsish. Big rip for him, but I'm working with an all-Korean lineup here, so I know that's what has to happen. Janu is probably our best player, so no moves at the off-tank position. As for main tank, I'm looking at a couple options. Option 1 is to make a pass at stand 1. This shores up our Ryan and Orisa problems. We haven't seen much of stand 1 on Winston, which is why I'm keeping Roar around. Winston is by far Roar's best hero, and quite possibly the only hero I trust Roar to play at this point. Option 2. If we can't get stand 1, is to go with either Bumper or Fisher. Both of these guys have previous synergy with Janu and Stitch and have shown incredible Ryan gameplay in the past. Also, I think it would be really funny if we got Fisher on his 5th Owl team. Moving over to the support line, I don't think either Arc or Aim God have been performing incredibly this season, but I also don't think either has performed poor enough to be dropped. I think a good option at flex support is Creative. He doesn't get much playtime on Soul and could be an upgrade over Aim God in his current form.
That would be a Soul move, is to sell someone that's good to another team and they do way better than Soul.
Yeah,
So
that's a classic Soul thing. And if he could be enough competition for the starting role to get Aim God back into his top form, or Rouge Hong if he's willing, I rate Arc's Mercy play fairly decently.
Unluckily, Mercy is kind of garbo at the moment. Do what Dallas could not and pick up Unique. DPS time.
Unique and creative
Yeah.
would be your supports.
I like that.
Unique and creative.
Just pick up all though, and then it's gonna be
Just
the
have
most
all the various ones. That would be really good.
Paragraph 3. DPS time. Stitch and Tuba are fine. They're not great, but they aren't awful. Here are the folks I'd consider signing. DM, as to better perform in the double hit scan meta. Erster, steal him. Take him to a better place where he can shine. Let him see the sun. Other solid options would be Ding, Babel, or even Who Are You if you're crazy enough to try and steal a Genji player from the ultimate Genji hoarders known as New York Excelsior. TLDR, Washington Justice. Main tanks, Stand 1, backup picks, Fisher and Bumper. Off tank, Janu is good, no changes. Main support, Unique, Flex support, Creative, backup pick, Rouge Hong, Scroll, DPS, DM, Erster, with backup picks being Ding, Babel, Who Are You, and also dropping Lulsich.
Also dropping Lulcius. I mean, at this point, Lulcius is dropped. Like, you know, he is, whatever the paperwork may say, Lulcius, he is falling. He is dropped. Like, he is not playing for this roster.
No,
He's
definitely not.
He's definitely not playing. So I do find it, I actually really do like the ideas that this person put forth.
I mean, he definitely assumes fat stacks.
Yeah, he assumed, but the only, when it starts getting a little unreasonable for me is DM and Erster as like your DPS lineup. It's like you're already stealing Stand 1.
Yeah.
And you want to steal DM, and then you want to get Erster from the rain. Like we've gone beyond fat stacks to like HBO's billions type of territory. Like this is an incredible amount that I would think would be it was actually pretty reasonable.
That would hit
to put
salary
in.
cap.
Yeah,
That would hit
luxury tag.
salary cap for sure.
Well, I mean, overall though, I do like the rebuild though. I honestly, if it that's not a bad team. I like the ideas of getting unique and creative.
It's definitely a fanfic. Yeah, that's
I mean, I like
yep.
fanfics.
I mean, you post that on Reddit, you'd get 1,000 upvotes,
course.
100%.
So, and then we just got linked from Soup JC. Says this duo is proving to be the ultimate combination of meme prowess and logical breakdowns. Yes, that is me. I'm the breakdowns, specifically just only breakdowns. I break down repeatedly, and then I'm proud. I have prowess. I breakdowns and prowess.
I don't know how to play off that.
You know how to play that
I
off
don't
one? Well,
I'm a voiceover artist, not an improv comedian.
sometimes it works that way. But okay, so good mailbag. I really like the Justice rebuild option there. So once again, if you want to, people are dropping question marks. Don't drop question marks, please. Don't drop those. But once again, if you want to tell us what other guests that you'd like to see, or some additions to the show, trust us, we have a lot of things in the pipeline. We're working on getting our flow back up. We have a lot of segments that were planned before we hit the COVID and had to go work from home. We're getting all back into lineup, so hopefully we can start getting a little bit more creative and unique ourselves once we get it up and running. But drop it in the YouTube comments or in my Discord channel, whichever one may be. Jane, do you have any?
Okay, that was a 10-10. I don't think even half chat noticed that pun that you just pulled off. But
which one?
Did you even notice?
I don't know which pun I put off. I don't remember.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of Contested. We'll see you next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central. Enjoy the games this weekend.